But welcome everybody. I hope everyone's hanging in there and um, really happy to be here and talking to you tonight. And I want to introduce, so Ginger's here with me. You met her the last time when we were physically in your community and able to be face to face, hopefully soon again. I also have our intern, Geraldine. And Geraldine, if you have your video on, maybe you can wave at people. So Geraldine is here from Zurich, and she's with us for some time now. She's based out of Palo Alto, and she is working with us on peninsula cameras and data, everything south of the Golden Gate Bridge primarily. So she will be your contact for anything we are doing together going forward to continue to collect data. So please say hello to Geraldine, and she'll be happy to be in touch with you. All right, so I think I'm going to get started, but anything else, Ginger, that I forgot?
I don't think so. I think that those are the housekeeping issues. So yeah, I think we can dive right in.
All righty. And everyone can hear me okay? All right. Okay, so here we are. It's beginning of 2021. We met with you mid 2019, and it's been a long 2020. However, we did still continue to collect data with everyone. I wanted to find out if anyone had any questions from the outset that I could answer or we could answer relating to the project and the data we're collecting together, and outstanding questions from anyone. Okay, well, let's get going. So just some again, sort of revisiting some of this history. When we look at the background for mountain lions, I just go a little bit into the history of where these critters have been over time. And in California, they have a complicated and difficult social and political history. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things to cover here because there's way too much to go into in this talk. But between 1907 and 1990, 13,000 pumas were harvested. The last fatal mountain lion attack on a human in the Bay Area was in 1909, and that was in Morgan Hill. And that was a mother and her daughter, after which they encountered a rabid puma, and they died from rabies. So not from the attack, but actually from rabies. And since then, sorry, somebody, can you turn, someone's mic is on, if you could turn that off, please. So in the Bay Area, we've had a couple of non-fatal attacks, and primarily on young children. And young children really are the size of a prey item, and there's lots of reasons why they might be more targeted, even though it is still an incredibly rare situation. So 3 fatal attacks in California in 25 years. I mean, the risks are really incredibly small that anyone would encounter, much less be attacked by a puma. So again, more highlights from California. The puma status over time, they went from a bounty hunted species to a game mammal, to a non-game mammal, and finally to a non-protected mammal. And by the mid 80s, only about 500 pumas remained in California. And this was the Reagan administration. And so Proposition 117 was passed in 1990. And this is where the current status of the mountain lion sits, a specially protected mammal. However, that's got many caveats, and we'll talk a little bit about those again, just to refresh your memory as we go. Depredation permits are taken out in California when a pet or livestock is taken by a mountain lion. And so these depredation permits come in 3 steps. So you have an incident report form seen on the left. You've got a depredation permit then issued to kill a lion, and then you are issued a depredation license tag. And these are the steps if you want to pursue the removal of a lion that has, say, taken your domestic cat or dog or hobby animal. And the depredation permit actually expires after 10 days. So if it's not acted on within 10 days, it is no longer valid. In the state of California, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife issues over 300 permits annually. And so approximately a third of those pumas are removed each year. And that is one of the causes for puma mortalities in the state, which is too high and needs addressing. So with the recent adoption of motion sensor trail cameras and security cameras, doorbell cameras, Ring, Nest, we are seeing this increase in perception of more numbers of pumas than there actually are. And so we try to address that with the communities we work in, and that's where the data is quite useful. So if you consider the home range size of a typical mountain lion, one individual may be seen on multiple cameras, which is in fact the case in Kings Mountain. So we'll be talking a little bit about that, but those are thoughts to keep in mind as you consider the data set. According to previous research, if you see on this map to the right, we had 2 female cats collared in the East Bay, and we have some overlapping ranges. This is really to give you a sense of the home range size of a female and how much they overlap. And basically the one with the larger home range actually had a dispersing cub, and the smaller home range, she had a really small young cub. So her range contracts while she's raising that cub, and they'll overlap with another female pretty comfortably and avoid each other, but usually no issues. So long-term research really does confirm that pumas occur at low densities, and they have these large home range sizes. Males are territorial, and if you look at these 2 home ranges of the females, there may be one more female that slightly overlaps on the left side of the larger female range, and then there may be one male that overlaps with all 3 at the edges. So this just to give you a sense of how these animals function with varying home range sizes. And if you look at the data from Mendocino National Forest, puma home ranges are roughly 100 square miles for females and almost 200 square miles for males. So it varies considerably depending on where the mountain lions are living. And in the Bay Area, we're looking at, sorry, go back there. We're looking at, right here, what you're seeing on this map is about 50 to 60 square miles for females. And that's true also of the Santa Ana mountain range in Southern California. So more urbanized landscapes, you're going to see the contracted ranges. Common misconceptions that I want to just bring to your attention again is large territories for pumas lead to this public perception of too many lions. And if they see 2 lions together, concern is voiced, and we have to sort of explain what's going on. And I've said this before, but I'd like to just repeat it so that we all are on the same page. These are 2 mating adults that will spend a couple days together. 2 to 3 days, sometimes mating, and then they'll separate. And the other instances where you will see a group of lions is a family group and or a couple siblings that will spend some time together before they disperse. So you'll have 1 or 2 cats detected again at multiple locations. And again, we see that in Kings Mountain. Think about the range size, and that obviously makes sense. The other misconception is pumas live in packs or prides, and I will reiterate, pumas are solitary when they're not mating or with young. So another thing to keep in mind. Let's talk a little bit about family groups and misconceptions about pumas that has led to intolerance of these cats and often poaching. Puma removal will disrupt the social structure of the population. So this is something that is especially concerning in an urban setting like the Bay Area, where there is tremendous fragmentation and loss of contiguous habitat. This is something I'll talk more about. Females are pregnant or raising young for 75% of their lifetime. So if a female happens to get poached or depredation permit removes her, she is most likely leaving behind young or she's pregnant. So the young stay with the mother. They are highly dependent on the mother for 18 months up to 2 years, and then they will disperse. So they're genetically programmed to disperse at that point. Young pumas without mother before dispersal age can do any or all of the following. So it's dehydrate or starve to death, get hit by cars. We saw that in San Mateo County this last year with the young cat that made the visit to San Francisco and was subsequently placed with a collar and didn't last long when it was placed back in the habitat. Young pumas without their mothers are also killed by other predators. They may attempt to take pets, livestock, or other small animals as prey, or they're removed from the wild and sent to zoos and other sanctuaries. So this happened quite a bit after the recent fires, and we'll talk about that as well. We have a big problem with poisons and rodenticides, and this is playing out right now in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Rat poisons kill wildlife indiscriminately, so bottom up. And arsenic kills pumas directly, and unfortunately arsenic is used a lot by some of the landowners in South Bay, and this is direct poison to a puma. So these are still used broadly, and residentially they've been banned. However, we're still seeing them in the necropsies of pumas and blood work. So 2 pumas in the Santa Cruz Mountains were just seen weak and sick in the past few days, and 1 has now died. And so this cat to the right is a screen grab from a Facebook post of a video. Some of you may have seen this. Very emaciated, sick puma who's limping. This cat is not yet, I think it's still out there. So its likelihood is not very good. But this video to the left is another cat that was eventually died. I'm going to show you this video right now from rodenticides, and it had mange, and you see how it's scratching and its tail's all emaciated. That cat passed away this last year, a year ago. So just touching on the significance of these poisons that are used on our wildlife, especially the impacts to the apex predator in our ecosystems. Puma removal effects are significant when stable resident pumas, male or female, are removed via depredation permits, poaching, vehicle strikes, or poisoning. As I just mentioned, it destabilizes the social structure, and it leads to these younger pumas competing to occupy the adult's home range. And so it really disrupts this sort of natural order. And the younger cats usually take smaller prey items. So that might include your pet, livestock, mesocarnivores, small mammals. And already some small mammals and mesocarnivores may be in a puma's diet once in a while, but it's not very frequent. And these younger pumas are unfamiliar with the landscape, new home range, and they are not very good at avoiding humans yet. So the headline here really is the adults are stable, they're settled, and they are the best pumas to have around us because they are sort of calming, and they're basically a stable population. And once you start to remove them, you start to see disruption. So I told Jen I'd talk a little bit about the recent fires, and I have to do that in conjunction with discussion around fragmentation. So if you look at this map to the right, we're currently doing a study on puma fragmentation throughout the Bay Area, and this study is ongoing. We're still collecting data for this, but if you look at this map that we have to the right, this is, so all the dots on it are sort of our camera placements and some of the current data collection. And the red patches are severely fragmented patches. So that includes the North Bay. But when you get to San Mateo, it's in the middle. So it's not completely fragmented. It's somewhat fragmented. However, and you guys all fit into this area, you see all the cameras we have placed in this region. The issue with this, compounded by the fires, is that these cats are coming from Santa Cruz Mountains. And primarily their only way out to disperse and move beyond these habitats is to go south. So this in itself is a problem. And, it can be a problem if they don't have suitable habitat to move through. So the 2020 fires throughout the Bay Area impacted wildlife across the board, and pumas as low density apex predators were really impacted due to their large home range sizes and territorial nature. So if you look at this map, there is tremendous fragmentation. And when we talk about fragmentation, we have to consider the fact that pumas are not necessarily able to use the habitat that you might think they can use. So quality habitat is something that we have been working on identifying for some time, and we've had a few surprises as we've worked on that. Human tolerance of wildlife is another big issue. So we must learn to coexist if we want to keep these predators on our landscape. And with the increasing fires, this becomes even more urgent. We've disrupted the habitat to a point where pumas really are forced to travel where they otherwise would not go. And that means for food, for mating, and dispersal. So it really puts them in harm's way. And that's what's happened this past year. So if you look at this map, and you see where the fires were, that's a pretty large chunk of habitat that was just immediately removed from, usability sort of categorization for pumas. And so what that causes then is pumas, first of all, several pumas have likely perished. We know of some. 3 cubs were brought to the Oakland Zoo. And the burned habitat is not useful for pumas necessarily beyond an initial year or two. And during that time, they're following the deer back into that new habitat where the deer move to forage in the new growth. So beyond that, pumas have lost cover and quality habitat. And at the magnitude of the 2020 fires, it's really tough to know at this point what that will mean for puma habitat in the long term. We also have this playing out in Henrico State Park, where that was a tremendously large fire, and we had a whole grid of cameras. We lost several cameras there too, but Interestingly, we did have a puma return to that habitat the day after the fire. So that was an interesting piece of data for us. So getting into the Kings Mountain project and what we embarked on with this community, some of the questions that we initially received from community residents at the project launch were the following. Are there too many pumas? Are they reducing prey numbers? Is CDFW releasing pumas into the area? And what about livestock and pet depredation? And what are the risks of attack on humans? Hosts on Nextdoor are stoking fear. Yeah, we know that Nextdoor has quite an ecosystem there that can do that. So something to be aware of. How can we protect livestock and pets? So we'll talk about each of these things, but I think the study that we have now embarked on twice, we're about to embark on another one, but we still have a ways to go with Kings Mountain if we want to have a complete data set and analysis for this community. We still have some work to do. So in the answer to all of these questions, let me go through the data and then we can come back to these questions if you guys still have these as questions. So our methods for this study were a little different simply because a research grid with the typical 4 km² cells were not uniformly possible for this Kings Mountain study. So that piece was different. This community data set is missing camera data, so we didn't get full data reported. So these preliminary observations are really what I'm discussing here today. We did recruit community members, you guys as citizen scientists, to monitor the trail cameras, record data, and share results, and that went mostly really well. I think COVID may have thrown a wrench or two in that, but we still were able to get a considerable amount of data. The study timeline was mid-2019 to late 2020. And the camera placements and sort of the settings and data processing really went as follows. The triggered cameras capture 3 consecutive pictures, and the data from the images was collected by Felidae volunteers. Image data cataloged by camera-based software and categorized in those different categories that you guys probably are all familiar with. Raw catalog data was then moved into Excel, binned into 1-hour increments. And the increments account for not only the 3-photo bursts, but they reduce overcounting the same individuals that linger at cameras or backtrack. And we see that quite often. So that's how we are assessing this data. So here's your neighborhood, your community. And on the left, we have a slightly zoomed in map with the three markers there in red identify the 3 cameras with the highest detection rates. And that's just to highlight. And the map to the right is just a zoomed out map where you can see all of the cameras throughout the study. This chart shows the total number of catalog detections and correlated with the number of trap nights. So the number of trap nights is the number of nights that a camera was up. And this, so on average, we had, cameras had between 1 detection every other day to 4 detections per day. And this is complete like detection. So it's not just pumas. And so the trap nights that were the highest was the Roy property. And then the fewest trap nights was, let's see here, the Scott property. And so you can look at that data while I'm chatting a bit, but this is what we have pulled from this group so far. And these are sort of the dates on when they were cataloged and average detections per day. Again, the 01, 09, and 07 had the most activity. So because cameras were out for different lengths of time, meaning different trap nights, this biases the animal detection counts because cameras that collected data for more time are able to detect more animals. It's probably obvious. Most commonly detected species are at the top, and this is not surprising. So gray fox, squirrel, deer, skunk, dog, humans. And in fact, humans dominate here, which is also not surprising. So you can look across to your camera and just see your data set below. And the small species, of course, birds and rodents, were common at some cameras, but you can't really depend on, you know, a consistent number on a camera based on, you know, it's based on number of variables on how it's set and, you know, its angle. So there's another page, but this is the first page of species. And you'll see the bobcats down there and the pumas. And compared to humans, 2,880 detected, we got 32. And then this is the second part of that chart. And thought we would get more owls, but we only got one. So let's talk a little bit about detections and overall detections of similar species from all cameras together. So these are just the whole data set. We got considerable detection from bobcats, which is unsurprising. We did get more detections of pumas than coyotes, which is also unsurprising in that area. And we'll talk more about that sort of landscape of fear, which I may have mentioned in the last meeting we had. And if you look at the bottom left chart, the number detected of humans and pets. So again, humans on foot, considerable number. Humans on bike, domestic cat, we got several domestic dogs, of course. And then to the right of that, other species of interest. So again, the squirrel and the gray fox and the deer were leading the way on that. And again, I just want to remind you that the data set's limited and there was an inconsistency in available data between these cameras. So we cannot formally compare detection over time or between cameras just yet. So Puma, moving to the Puma versus common prey sightings. Now this really puts it in perspective. You can barely see those Puma bars there, and that's daytime for the light orange and nighttime for the brown. So common prey items, all of them move more at night, except for the common prey items. In that category, though, of course, you've got animals that move a lot during the day. So this is another map of your region, but this is just, again, a comparison of day and night sightings. So you can't see this so well here. I've got another map a little further on. I like to show a lot of maps just so you can get the visuals. But these are camera groupings, so they're not, the placements are the same, but it's just to show you how many night sightings there were versus day sightings. And then some of the camera locations on there don't seem to have sightings. So let's talk about the Puma detections again, day and night. We've got each camera broken out here and some did not get Pumas. So again, looking at nighttime versus day, it's very clear we already know that pumas move primarily from dusk to dawn. Yes, there are daytime movements and sightings, but that is primarily because pumas are either subadults and moving around at that time of day with mother, or they're just using the habitat to rest in a daybed, and they will move occasionally in the early morning or in the afternoons. And that shifts. Again, at the urban edge, we see some of that changing in real time. And 3A here had a puma that felt pretty comfortable hanging on your property or in that area during the day and at night, which is quite interesting. Usually they need to feel safe to do that. So that was maybe a spot where they had a daybed. This graph shows active times for pumas. So again, night and day, which is something we're all interested in because pumas really are moving primarily at night. And if you look at the highest month of activity in 2020 at night with pumas, it was in September. But again, daytime remains pretty low for those movements, very few detections, primarily nighttime sightings. And we are working on a COVID study. So we are looking at data sets around the Bay Area to understand better what the shelter in place, stay at home orders, those impacts on wildlife movements, specifically pumas and bobcats. And we can fill you in on where we are with that when we analyze that data set.
And one of the questions we've received, Zara, was really speaking to the increased number of, or the increased amount of trail use by humans.
Right.
During this time. So it kind of went from people not being there to suddenly people being there more.
Yeah, this is a great question. This is something that really concerns me in general. I was talking with a reporter last week about this. The increased activity on trails by humans is on one hand a good thing because people are getting outside and they can, you know, get their fill of nature. On another hand, it's actually not so good for wildlife and, you know, past a certain point. And what we've learned and what we find more and more with our data is that in areas where there's large amounts of human hiking, running, biking traffic, especially pumas avoid the area. And so not only are they avoidant of the area, but if people are using those trails at night, as well as during the day, pumas will likely leave the area. We saw this in North Bay. And so it's of interest to us to kind of consider some parks to sort of ask humans to stay off trails after, you know, sort of through the nighttime so that wildlife can actually move safely through and do what they do, especially crepuscular animals such as pumas and bobcats who spend a lot of time moving at night as well. So some of the summary, I have a couple of slides of summary, so I'm going to talk a little bit about these things, but mammalian species that we expected to detect were all recorded, which is not surprising. Poaching does occur as well as some pet and livestock depredation, but we are not actively tracking this for this study. This was the impetus for this study with Kings Mountain was not based on that, whereas it was for a previous study we did. We are you know, taking anecdotal data, but we're not formally looking at that. So far, we've detected carnivore spatial avoidance. So this is pretty typical in that it's that landscape of fear. So pumas are the apex predator. Coyotes will avoid them. And we see that from our camera placements throughout the Bay Area. And so in La Honda, when we did our study there were many questions from community members about where have all the coyotes gone? And actually the answer to that was they're there, they're just not, they're avoiding the pumas. And so that's something to consider. And we see that with bobcats as well, because on occasion mountain lions will take coyotes and bobcats and make them a meal. So pumas avoided humans both spatially and temporally, so in space and time, and that's all, again, very expected and what we find elsewhere. So we found no evidence to suggest an increase in the puma population. Looking at some of the smaller mammals, so we've, specifically raccoons and coyotes are not species of concern, and we had a lot of questions around not seeing them on cameras in our last study, and it's something we like to talk about just to put those questions to rest. But in many states, these two are actually considered a nuisance. They multiply quickly. But they also have an interesting relationship with pumas. And so, yes, they will predate on both, but these species are in abundance. So you guys may see raccoons and coyotes around your hood, but they are there. Landscape of fear concept. So the risk of predation for these animals causes all of these smaller mammals to be way more cautious and less likely to detect, to be detected on our cameras. Interestingly, raccoons are associated with riparian habitats, and due to the removal of predators on the top predators on most landscapes in the contiguous US, and the adaptability of raccoons to live close in proximity to us, they're often seen scavenging in neighborhood trash cans. So they've figured out the urban edge. They know how to make a living, and they do very well at it. With ongoing poaching and vehicle strikes in the entire region, this increase of teenager orphaned pumas and loss of stable older males does increase the risk of predation on small and medium-sized mammals. So that would include raccoons, opossums, even coyotes at times, but foxes. So coyotes were detected as we expected. They are, they're in abundance. Due to exploitation of wolves and pumas in California, US coyotes are now found in 49 to 50 of all states. So they're historically a Western species. And hey, Sybil. Sorry, you guys. Hey,
I'm here.
Can you mute your phone? Is that where the noise is coming from? I'm not sure, but if it is, maybe just mute.
Maybe because it said I wasn't muted, but I'm not sure how to do it.
Oh, well, I don't know if that noise is coming from you anyway. Don't worry about it. Okay?
I don't either. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not. But I got a message that said I wasn't muted, but then I don't know how to mute it.
Okay, no worries.
I can see the picture, but okay. All right.
No worries, yeah. So our research has documented coyotes, specifically alpha pairs, to avoid some trail cameras. They really do not like trail cameras, and we see this often with coyotes. We do get them on camera, but they always look like they're shocked and very uncomfortable on our cameras. So predator avoidance is likely. Our cameras at the urban edge detect coyotes frequently where pumas are not present. And so that's pretty typical. Along with poaching of pumas, coyotes are most likely being poached too. So another look at this map, and there's a zoomed in map to the right, again, of your area. Just another look at the day versus night sightings and the camera locations. The Kings Mountain Puma ranges based on very partial data would allow for 2 to 3 individuals and certainly no more. But most of the data we've cataloged and analyzed there's definitely no more than 3 pumas in this data. So likely same individual on multiple cameras. Again, think of the home range size, needs, and looking at your habitat here. There's really great habitat around Kings Mountain. So it's something that you are quite lucky to have and want to hold on to. And pumas clearly feel comfortable moving in it, and there's great cover and prey. So takeaways. I put this photo in here at the top because it's from our last study, but it's such a great photo. It's either a yawn or it's like a surprise expression there from the puma. The one below that is actually pretty interesting. I had to brighten this photo a little bit, but we don't often get several photos of a puma resting, and whoever's property this is on, you know who you are, but it's pretty intriguing. And eventually it got up and took off. Kings Mountain ecosystem is intact, and so relative to diversity of mammalian species detected, it is in good shape. Pumas, both spatially and temporally, do try hard to avoid humans in space and in time. Pumas are apex predators and adults, and will also prey on pets and hobby animals. So anything unprotected, they don't know the difference. So they actually can't determine whether a goat or a sheep or a cat or a dog is something they're not supposed to be taking. Coexistence with pumas is easy if pets and hobby animals are fully protected. And so we have given a lot of guidance over time on fully enclosed structures to assist if people have hobby animals. We always advise people to bring their pets in at night. And I know a number of people have outside cats, and I myself had outside cats for a long time. There's not much you can do there other than hope they can protect themselves. The landscape of fear concept makes all other species more cautious of the puma in this region. The puma is the top predator. So we no longer have the wolves and we no longer have grizzlies. So the puma is it, and really important to our ecosystem. Are you guys seeing that red mark on the screen? Okay, maybe not. So how can you help? This map shows all of our work, different areas of the Bay Area. You can see the little red dots, which is camera placements. Then there's a number of different hair snares to collect DNA. And that's just to give you a sense of our greater Bay Area. And again, if you look in that center, near San Jose up to San Francisco, all of that is basically non-habitat. And unfortunately, pumas sometimes get stuck trying to cross, say, 280, or trying to find somewhere to disperse, to move to new habitat, and they end up in human development, which we see once in a while. So how you can help is to value the gift you have. It's a rich oasis of biodiversity, busy urban landscape. If you have pets, children, or hobby animals, take precautionary and reasonable steps to protect them. Spread the word on what you've learned here, and please help us prevent misinformation in the community. You guys have been great to work with. We're not finished, but it's been really a joy to work with this whole group. And we've enjoyed it despite COVID, not being able to see you face to face. But Reach out if you need help with specifics around protective enclosures or removing deer attractants on your property. We're happy to step in and help you. And help us collect more data. So,
and that really involves the, systematic monthly collection of images from the cameras. So that Jen had asked, how can we help with moving the project forward? And it's just sort of that religious action of checking the cameras and sending us the data is the most helpful thing to us. So that would be great. Zara, we do have quite a few questions. One question is, the San Francisco Water District is working on building a trail parallel to Skyline from Highway 92 to Kings Mountain. Have you been included in those discussions? And how would you expect the fencing to affect the pumas and prey?
Yeah, so we were initially, I gave a talk to their biologists about 3 years ago now, and there was discussion about it. The timing wasn't set, but it was pretty certain to move forward. And so we fully expected that. I know they opened up a portion of it, and we were pretty against it. We talked about puma ranges and how safe the pumas are to move throughout the PUC lands. However, it's a highly political thing, and it was basically already decided and voted on. And I know that mountain bikers have pushed really hard to have that opened up. So we've been collecting data on the PUC property for over 10 years. So we have a significant data set. And we are looking at a project using, looking at SFPUC data, as well as a property in Jenner where they opened up a trail as well recently, to understand better the impacts to two differing habitats. But we know that it's not going to have a positive impact, and it's pretty distressing to us because the PUC land is basically the only safe zone for a puma currently, unless you go into wilderness habitats and Mount Hamilton and parts of Santa Cruz Mountains, and so I can't really tell you anything other than we are very in touch with PUC. There's not much we can do about that opening trail, but fencing is also a big issue, not only for pumas, but for their prey and for all the other species. Pumas can get over a lot of fences, but the smaller critters can't, and deer can't. So this is it's an issue. But I appreciate the question, and we will stay on it.
Okay, and another question. Let's see, is just the lifespan, typical lifespan of a male and female puma?
Yeah. So this used to be longer. I mean, male and female will survive in the wild up to, the longest I've ever seen, and I've been working with pumas in the field for 13, 14 years. The oldest puma I've ever seen was 11 years old. Supposedly they live up to 13 years in the wild. The problem these days is they can't survive that long based on human encroachment. And so the fragmentation has become a bigger and bigger issue, but they should at least live till 6 or 7, which is kind of typical. Depending on the health, again, we're seeing some health issues and some genetic issues in pumas in the Central Valley in California. And so we're starting to see that throughout California in pockets. And so it is already affecting the lifespan of pumas. In captivity, they can live up to, 18, 20 years. So in the wild, it's a question mark at this point, but I would say typically in the Bay Area, we had an old cat that was probably 8 or 9 in North Bay that was taken on a depredation permit a couple of years ago now. And that was the oldest puma I've seen in quite some time in this region.
Okay, another question is, are opossums typical prey? While working on data entry, I found pictures of a puma killing an opossum, but then left it there. I was wondering why the puma did not feed on it.
Yeah, they will feed on opossums. So maybe that puma was just picky that day. Not sure. That's interesting though.
And a last question, why do pumas avoid humans? And do they have to have an experience to learn to avoid us?
Pumas avoid humans. It's built into their genes at this point. They've been persecuted by humans for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they were extirpated on the east of this country. And it's literally built into their DNA to fear humans. We are the top gun. We're the top predator in the system. And, when there are mistaken connections by a puma to a child as prey, it's very rare. Pumas do not stalk us. We're not on their menu. They don't like how we taste. And we're just not something they pursue naturally. Any of the attacks you hear about or the issues you see, you guys may have seen that Utah video of the runner. I think everybody saw that one, right? That was an amazing video, mainly because the runner, first of all, he knew what his mistake was. And if you saw the entire video, you saw what caused the event, which was he approached the cubs. He never should have approached the cubs. He thought they were bobcat cubs or bobcats, but he approached the cubs. The mom was there. That is one of the top reasons a puma may, chase you out of the territory, which she did, or attack you. And that video, interestingly, she could have killed him easily, but she spent 15 minutes escorting him out far enough away to make sure he was clear that this was her territory. And female pumas are they're especially protective of their young and fierce when they have young that small, and they were quite small. But I think that pumas, so it's interesting because I had a face-to-face, very close encounter before I was formally involved in this work, or I was sort of starting out, and it was 5 feet away from my face as a runner at dusk. And, in that moment, I was scared. Of course I was scared and frozen. And the puma could have killed me, and it was above me looking down out of the brush. But it was interesting what I thought about after that moment, and it was brief. It feels like 10 hours, but it's like 10 seconds. And the cat became disinterested very quickly and just turned around and left, and was kind of disappointed. But the feeling it left me with was, this is not my habitat. I'm a visitor. And it was a profound feeling, and it stuck with me for a long time. It was the highest awareness experience I've had around pumas or any wildlife species. And to this day, I think about that because I felt like a visitor to this animal's land, and nothing happened. And it was an incredible event. But ever since then, I've been in the field pursuing these animals. We don't capture anymore. And we feel pretty strongly about that now. But I used to do that, and I never felt good about it. And I also, I also felt like we were sort of invading on their space, and we didn't really have a right to be doing that. Yes, it's research. Yes, you're collecting data, and it was great to do that. But I never had a cat lunge at me in the field, and I was handling their cubs in front of them at times. I never felt like I was going to be attacked. Interestingly, I mean, I think that yes, there is a risk. They're a predator, of course, they're a predator, but there's got to be a reason for them to come after us. They don't just come after us. And so if you were to ask me about any of the attacks that have ever occurred, I can give you an answer as to why it happened. And that's what's interesting about pumas. I think people that study sharks and wolves feel the same way. They just say, look, this is what the data shows. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but they have a long history of being persecuted, killed, extirpated by humans, and that's driven the current state.
So Karen in La Honda missed our talks and whatnot down in La Honda, but is aware of that study and asks if the puma population there is similar to the Kings Mountain population, and has it changed at all in the fires?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everything down in that region just north of Santa Cruz Mountains has changed, temporarily. It's not a permanent thing, but when a puma is displaced, it's going to end up in unfamiliar habitat and sometimes get in a territorial fight, sometimes make it out, and all kinds of trouble can happen for that puma. But that's sort of there's always a cycle of change in the population. So the population is never just, the same. And one thing to remember is that with these fires, again, I was saying this habitat, this huge piece of habitat is lost. So they're going to go north, they're going to go south, they're going to try to go wherever they can escape the fire, number one, and number two, find prey and survive and wait it out. And that has likely had an impact a bit on La Honda as well as Kings Mountain, less so possibly Kings Mountain. La Honda, they overlap those areas, but they're not exactly the same. And yeah, they're probably, there's probably a puma or two that move through both. So I think that hopefully answers your question. And if she wants the report, we're happy to send you that report from La Honda.
Yeah, you can let me know here in the chat your email, and I can send that to you. And then another last question is, sorry, there's another one coming in. What does their sleeping den typically look like?
Anything. So that's also another thing I hear. I hear a lot of reference to dens, and a puma den could be a brush of leaves. It could be under a branch. In other parts of the country where there are rocky outcrops or cliffs, or it can be anything, literally. So some of the there's dense brush through these riparian habitats, and if there's a safe area where a puma can take her cubs that are under a brush or in a hollowed out log, she'll do it in there. I've come across dens where the cubs are in the wide open at the bottom of a cliff face, and of course this wasn't California, but in the wide open. So they do their best to protect their young. They find whatever they can to protect them from, the predators who can take them when they're most vulnerable. So coyotes, bobcats, foxes. I mean, they're incredibly vulnerable when they're tiny like that. So anything, to be honest. So it's not a particular type of den you're going to find. It is vastly different across the landscape, depending on the puma, the female, what's available, what she can find. and, you know, the safest spot she can put them in. So it's always different.
Okay, and I think that is it.
Great. Well, we would like to complete this project, so we're gonna, you know, talk with you all over, say, a large email, a group email to find out your interest in that. But maybe let us know if you're interested in continuing to help finish up this data set so that we can give you a more formal finding. And, you know, we'd love to do that.
Yeah, and both gathering the images, you know, monitoring cameras, but also we have data cataloging work if you want to work remotely and aren't necessarily wanting to go up on trails, or if you want to do both. So that takes an hour of training, but it's a remote job and it's a constant need for us. With as many cameras as we have out, we have a lot of data to catalog.
And if anyone has any questions they want to unmute and ask, go ahead. I mean, feel free. Sometimes it's easier just to ask. And besides that, I also want to remind you, Geraldine is here. Wave, Geraldine. She's our awesome intern. And she is going to help us if, you know, as we continue with this data set, we can be available to provide support.
And can you unshare your screen so everybody can see each other?
Sure.
Great.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering if you could tell us what kind of vocalizations males and females use, and besides olfaction, how do they use the vocalizations to find each other?
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny because I didn't, in throwing this talk together for you guys, I was thinking only about our meeting, and usually I go through all of those details in Puma talks and I share the sounds for you. However, let me tell you that they are a small cat, so they don't make a roar sound. They don't have the specialized hyoid apparatus in the larynx. And so they make sounds very similar to your house cat. Purrs, whistles, growls, hisses. The young ones will chirp. So you'll hear a chirp from young puma to mother, often back and forth, and it sounds quite a bit like a bird. So it's a good disguise. And other than that, they don't, and the females, when they're in heat, it's an incredible screech, very loud and shrill. And if you're in a canyon, it is especially haunting. So that happens, you know, mostly in the spring, you're going to hear that, but they are sort of year-round mating. So when a male and female are looking for each other, they'll mark the territory to find each other, but she will also let out these screeches, which signal to the male that she's ready to mate. And then they partner up and hang out together for a few days. And then if she's pregnant, she's got a gestation of about 3 months before she has her young. But other than that, very few sounds. They're not, you know, they do make sounds, but they're really small compared to, you know, some big roaring tiger. Not like that at all.
And sometimes the sounds that foxes make get confused for pumas, where in fact they're foxes that seem to be a little bit more noisy in most residential neighborhoods than pumas. So we've had a lot of people think they have a puma in the backyard when in fact they have a fox. So, but they're similar pitch, kind of high pitched calls.
Yeah.
Right, and if they see him with the fluffy tail, they know it's not a bobcat. Maybe it's a young fox, or thought people could mistake it for a young puma, maybe.
Yeah, we get a lot of that. In fact, one thing I didn't say, which I'll say again, is Puma's sightings are most often incorrect. So 90 to 95% of all Puma sightings in the state of California are actually not mountain lions. So keep that in mind when you hear sightings reports. There's often sighting reports in San Mateo, but unless you see video or footage or an image, don't just believe it, because most of them are wrong. I think we just had one last week that was not ever validated, and so and people get all worked up and alarmed, and it's unfortunate because unless you have an image or a video, it's more than likely is not. It's just easy to mistake a puma for anything. I mean, for a number of different animals.
Right, we get a lot of those San Mateo County alert mountain lion sightings, but the only one I've ever actually seen was on Highway 84 when part of the road was closed for the slide, and the puma was walking along the little divider thing that was, the cement thing to keep the road in place and people from driving there. I drove right by him, like very close, and it was a puma. But that's as close as I've ever seen one.
That's crazy. It was a good experience.
Yeah, but I, nowhere to pull over and take pictures.
Yeah.
And he would have been gone if I did, I'm sure.
Yeah. So one of the communities we're working with right now is Pacifica, and you all may have heard of just multiple sightings in that area. And again, it's this really great habitat abutting the Pacifica, El Granada area, Half Moon Bay, and the community is like you guys. They're awesome about it. They're just, we're in touch all the time, and they're sending sightings, and we're identifying, for the most part, we can identify the individuals moving through because there's so much similarity, and it's cameras that aren't too far apart. So it's really great to work with communities that actually are really interested in coexisting.
And these genetic issues make the research even more important because our great concern is that the numbers are declining fairly rapidly, and then there's this genetic issue, which is a sort of precursor to an extinction event, and we really want to keep these animals here. They have an outsized role to play in our ecosystems. So it's important that we do this work and we sort out this sort of fragmentation issues, et cetera. So your participation is really wonderful, and it really matters.
Anything else, you guys? Otherwise, I'll let you go. We're over a bit.
Thank you, Zara and Ginger, for your time today and sharing with us on Kings Mountain. We appreciate you guys being our first speakers of the year. And I'm sure we will all be in touch with you because we want to make sure this habitat stays the way it is for these guys.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Great. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you. This is great. Thanks a lot.
We appreciate it.
Okay, reach out if you have any questions too. We're here.
And Jen, I'll send you the recording.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, you guys. Have a good evening.